who's to say what dressing older is, and what an 11-year-old should dress like, what a 20-year-old should dress like. I mean, it's kind of like an unfair thing to say. So that's like the most objective thing. So that was like the one thing I kind of had like a weird problem with.
Do you think it was necessary or relevant to include that description?
I want to say no, because I mean, like other people, I know a lot of people have problems with subtly kind of trying to pin the blame like on the victim. Like she kind of brought it upon herself by dressing older than she was, which is unfair to do. I mean, regardless of the circumstance, I mean, it's unfair to try to pin blame on a victim if you don't know the full story. It's unfair to do that anyway, particularly like just an 11-year-old. She's only 11 years old. She's not able to defend herself really. So I mean, I viewed that as a pretty irrelevant detail that could have probably been left out.
So do you think that by including this description, the victim is being further victimized?
Arguably.
How can journalists balance the right to privacy versus newsworthiness?
Well, I mean, it's always a fine line. I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, obviously you learn like in ethics class and then like media law in particular. I mean, there's kind of degrees of privacy. It kind of depends on the issue. I mean, obviously you're not going to just go, some random guy's house and just invade his privacy just for like no real reason. You only kind of not really betray someone's privacy, but I mean, you have to put something that you want to balance it with is, how relevant is this for the public to know? How much does the public need to know? Like, is this really important information, or is this just plain and simple unflattering to this one person and an invasion of their privacy? I mean, you kind of have to always be balancing the two, like, is this going to actually really harm this person, or is this something that this person did, and while it may invade their privacy, what they did was bad and had a negative effect on so many other people that the public has a right to know about it.
Is it necessary or relevant to include this element of description in the report?
Well, I don't think it's even if you feel it's necessary or relevant, if you don't have it from someone whose name you can use, then you can't use it. Then you can't use it. And then I think you have to ask yourself, if the only way you get this quote is from someone who wants to remain anonymous, then is it really reflective of what people are thinking?
Is it ethically responsible to include this element of description in the report?
Absolutely not. Now, if it were someone who was chiming in with someone, with a thought that was being repeated over and over by people who are being named, that's one thing. But when it's just one person, when it's one instance of someone saying something, I just would not use an anonymous source. I mean, there would have to be so many people whose lives were at risk or endangered or something, and if the only way I could help them was to use an anonymous source, then I would. But that would be it.
Do you think by including this description, the victim is being further victimized?
Absolutely. It's really easy to say things when you don't have to be accountable for them. But, to me, even that whole thought process is regressive. I mean, that's a whole other issue outside of newspaper ethics, but...
Would you consider this a case of stereotyping?
Yes. And just of backwards thinking, like I said before, regressive thinking that, that a woman asks for something because of the way she looks or she dresses or, is ridiculous.
How do you think journalists can balance the right to privacy versus newsworthiness?
What I tell students is the bottom line is to ask yourself, is someone going to suffer or be injured emotionally by what is in this article?
Nicole, as an editor, how do you think the writer got away with including the characterization which blames the victim?
If the story was a smaller story in the newspaper, from what I've experienced, not as much attention is paid to the smaller stories. So I think that maybe the editors got a little bit lazy and were focusing on the bigger stories, and that's how stuff like that slipped out.
Makes sense. How do you think it slipped past the editors, and if the editor was aware of it, why do you think he or she allowed it to be published?
I don't know, like I really think it's one of those like laziness things, or maybe the editor didn't realize exactly what she was saying. It could have been like a really big deadline and it was a last minute story and they're just like, let's read it once and fix the grammatical errors and not really care about anything else. So
As an editor, would you have allowed such sexist/biased characterization to be published? And do you believe it was ethical to publish it because members of the community thought so?
no, I don't like, as a writer, especially as a journalist, you need to be invisible when you're reporting. I would not have let that run. I would have tried to rephrase it. You really can't change what the community says. You're supposed to be invisible, but if you have quotes from other people saying that, like that stuff would like putting her in bad limelight, then yeah, I guess I don't know. It's up to the editor's executive decision. I personally wouldn't have put in bad quotes, just making her look bad.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do it that way. You're supposed to do balanced reporting. Show both
Exactly.
sides, not lean it more towards one. And I definitely don't think the men are going to be the ones suffering.
After reading the article, what was your initial reaction?
It was a sad and tragic story, but I feel like the blame was put on the wrong people.
Do you think this story is an invasion of privacy?
I don't think it invades privacy because the girl's name and location are never released throughout the story.
What is your opinion of the comments regarding the girl's dress?
The girl's allowed to dress however she wants to dress. Just because she dresses like an older woman doesn't mean that you can assault her.
Did you find the story to be biased at all, and if so, where?
I think there was a lot of bias in the story. It almost felt like the reader was supposed to feel sorry for the boys. The only time that the sympathy was ever shown for the girl was when they talked about the quick comment at the church for holding prayer for her. Even when they talked about her switching schools, they discussed how it was bad for the community and nothing was said about the girl.